We are live. Hello and welcome to Community Manager Live. I'm David Dewald, community manager at Sienna.com. I always do that.com and media guy at thecommunitymanager.com. Each week we bring you a collection of community professionals together to discuss a topic suggested by our audience. If you would like to chat along with us today, you can join us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, where we can put your questions and comments right into our live stream and handle them right then and there. If you prefer to just watch or listen, you can do so on Twitch or LinkedIn, and you can find all of those links at the top of the page on the communitymanager.com. Oh, blah. See, it's a live show, people, so mistakes will happen. I'm going to go back and introduce everybody, or give everybody a chance to introduce themselves. Today we have 3 guests joining us so far. We may get a latecomer. So we'll see if that happens. We'll go around the horn here. I'll let Tim go first. You can just say who you are, what you do, and where you do it.
I'm Tim McDonald. I am in Tampa, Florida, and I am the head of community at homeroom.club. And I will say .club because if you search .com, you'll probably get something different.
Jeremy?
Hey everyone, I am Jeremy. I'm based in the Bay Area and I currently run a support community for Amplitude, a digital analytics solution, and have been building brand communities across governments, nonprofits, and at software companies. So I'm excited to chat with everyone.
Isabel?
Yeah, thanks, Dave, for the invite. Hi, everyone. My name is Isabel. I'm based in Ireland, and I'm a community manager for a hospitality tech company called Muse. And I manage their internal community for their product and content team. And I'm also, as well, a podcast host of my podcast is called CSM Toolbox, but I'll be doing some rebranding to it now now that I'm a community manager instead of a senior customer success manager. So I think more on that in the new year.
Very cool. And Bree?
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here. I am in Hawaii on the Big Island in a little town called Waimea. It's still early here compared to you East Coasters. But I'm a community architect, so I help product-led brands become community-led. And I work for my own company called Ember, and it's a blast. So thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you for joining us. The way that this works is we will ask a question of our little panel here. You can jump in and answer right away, or we can sit and have a little period of awkward silence. What we do is we put the questions up above us so that if you come late to the show or later on the restream, it's there. It's really to help me stay on track because I will diverge and talk about all kinds of things except the question. But we'll start off with our first question, and that is, what other jobs prepared you to be a community manager or a community architect, and how did you use them to get your first community job?
Well, if I can take that, and
Sure.
Hi, Ella, I just saw there from the chat. I have been a senior customer success manager for a few tech companies, and I think I treat now the internal community that I manage as if they were my customers, as I did before. I think at the end of the day, we get to talk to people. I don't think any of us will be managing a community of robots, or maybe in the future, who knows? But I think it's that same perhaps motivation that people can have, or engagements for the communities that we are managing, or that folks listening are managing as well. So I think, and even when I mentioned to people as well that I was moving from customer success to community, that they will tell me about things that I wouldn't have noticed myself, activities and many of the practices that perhaps overlap with both customer success and community. So I will say that the work that I did before with customers, I'm just applying this to my colleagues, really, with the things that I do, the events that I run, etc.
Yeah, thank you for that. Hassan joined us. I'm going to let him come in and just introduce yourself, say hello, tell us who you are, what you do, and where you do it.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Cool. Hey, everyone. So my name is Haas. Thank you, David. I am a senior manager of a global developer community at Turing.com. So Turing helps US tech companies hire software developers from abroad. So I'm one of the senior managers. Unfortunately, I got impacted by some recent layoffs. There was a restructure. And so now I'm on the market looking for a new role, looking for kind of senior marketing and community roles. So yeah, I came across this this event. Sounded good. Additionally, I run a community called House, which is for queer, trans people of color thriving at the intersection of tech, creativity, and culture. So that is something that I run. I'm organizing a career summit in December that will be virtual. So yeah, I mean, I'm super passionate about communities and bringing people together. So I'm happy to be here.
Oh, thank you. Our first question was, what other jobs prepared you to be a community or work in community, and how did you use them to get your old job, I guess, or your first community job? You want to take a stab at that since you're right there?
Okay, so what like previous jobs?
Yeah, maybe prepared you to work with communities online or.
Sure. I think, you know, I was somebody that just kind of really gravitated towards meeting people online when I was even pretty young. You know, when I was like maybe 15, that's when AOL came out, and like I was in the chat rooms and talking to people. I think especially like as a queer person, like it was really important for me to use like whatever online means I had to find people, find community, find like-minded peeps. I think that also then led to my first role. My first job was for Gay.com. This was in 2005. So I was started there as an editorial assistant. And so, and Gay.com was like a personal chat network in addition to like an editorial website. So I started off writing editorial, writing news. And one of the things that they had me do was managing the discussion forums. And so to me, like that was really interesting. It was like 2005, I feel like early days of kind of social, when the internet started becoming a little bit more conversational. And so to me, like that was really interesting. And so then that led to my first like online, I was an online community manager for a website called Confetti. That was a wedding website. And I was managing discussion forums. And then that just kind of led to like my whole career of really focusing on social media. Social media kind of like, you know, companies started using Facebook, Twitter around like 2008, 2009. So I found that really interesting. And then I just kind of really built a career on social media and bringing people together. And like, you know, just even in the past few years, like I've been really passionate about trying to basically bridge the gap between online and in person. And so I've always, before I even started House, which is the community that I started for queer trans people of color, I had another in-person networking event called GAG, GAGLDN. I lived in London for many years. And so, you know, just bringing people together like that have shared interests, shared challenges, that can learn from each other, that can connect on a personal level. To me, that's really powerful and something that I really enjoy. I think just naturally, like I'm somebody that I always think of like the community manager as like, if you think of someone who's like if you think of a party, it's like the party host, the person who kind of welcomes people in, who introduces people to one another, you know, really tries to make those connections and create like a good experience. So I'm pretty good at that, like, you know, organizing get-togethers with friends and things like that. I get frustrated sometimes when you have friends who just never really reach out or initiate. And like, I was talking to my parents or my mom, she's like, look, that's not everyone's personality, but I don't know, it gets tiring trying to be the person who's always initiating, hey, like, let's get together, or let's do this. But, you know, but yeah, that's a little bit about, I guess, like what kind of led into my career.
Okay. That was good.
I think that topic we're going to have to use kind of like the, you know, preventing burnout for community managers too.
Yeah, we'll make that into a new one. Bree or Jeremy, did you want to take a stab at it?
Yeah. Well, the very first job was being the oldest sibling of 4. So I
Big
was
job.
like,
Big job.
big job. Yeah, we carry the world, especially as oldest daughters. So I mean, I love my siblings, and we've always had like a ton of fun together. I grew up on a farm, so we were like a mile away from our Amish neighbors. So if there was ever like events to be had or community moderation, you could call it, between conflicts and disputes, there was just a lot. Like we were just this little crew that like moved through life together. So that, I mean, really in a lot of ways, that was a formative experience for my personality that I think lended itself to my community work. My first role out of university, I worked for a social enterprise brand and came on as customer service. So Isabel, I really resonate with what you said. A lot of like what you're doing one-on-one with customers in the community world, you're really just creating more of a group. Instead of like individual therapy, it's group therapy. We used to joke like as customer success or customer service, you're really just like a therapist. So in community management, you're really just a group therapist. God help us all. But it is really, I was in that role for a little under a year before I got tasked with creating my first community for a brand. And this community was more in the direct sales space. So I was managing like consultants and finding them and training them and recruiting them and growing them and creating leadership development programs. So it was all of until I left that role, I didn't really see that as a community role because it was so heavily in sales and marketing and in like people development, but I just never really had the language to articulate it as a community role. And it wasn't until I left that I was like, oh my gosh, I've been doing community for almost 7 years. And in some ways, some of the hardest elements of community because there is this like sales component. So it was pretty full on. And I was pretty tired at the end, but that will segue into our burnout conversation later. So I'll pass it over to Jeremy.
Great. Yeah, it's cool to hear everyone's journey. One thing that came to mind based on what you were mentioning, Hassan, is at the CMX Summit, they had this talk by Priya Parker, who wrote The Art of Gathering. And it's so true. And I feel like especially after the lockdown, we're all just relearning how to get together and meet in person. And that's something that I've had to ramp up to and plan those things. But in terms of my career, my first job out of college after like a slew of internships was I was an educator with the Peace Corps. I moved to China and spent 2 years teaching at a university. So I feel like I learned just the art of moderation and curation and being basically on a stage performing like to like 700 people every day. I had very large classes. I was kind of thrown into the deep end after training and had to navigate like language barriers. And I spoke a little bit of Mandarin, studied it growing up in the Bay Area. But yeah, that I think really prepped me. And it took me a while too to be able to label those skills of like, not everybody is skilled at communicating across cultures, or not everybody is able to type out responses that are thoughtful and moderate on the internet. So because from that role, I then moved back to San Francisco and worked in local politics. So I like registered voters and used tech to mobilize people around causes across the aisle. So it was kind of nonpartisan work. So I got a real crash course in just what motivates people, how to get people involved, and then was able to pivot that into entering the tech world when I worked at a startup incubator like 5 years ago now. So I think if you're able to communicate effectively, you're good at writing, you're good at engaging people and just aware of what generates kind of the response that you're looking for. A lot of it, again, is like soft skills, which I don't really like that term, but there's definitely, to your point too, Bree, like a lot especially when you're working in like private companies, that ties into like metrics and reporting on like revenue goals that I've had to learn kind of on the job. Because as an educator, right, you're trying to impact the lives of your students. So that's like a goal. But as a political organizer, it's like, how many people did you get to register to vote? A lot of times it's in private companies, it's like aligning incentives to generate like cost savings or like increase like financial outcomes. So that's been kind of the adjustment, I would say. That's it.
I love that, Jeremy, that you brought that up, because it's like something I've talked to so many people about that, are looking for jobs that, maybe had part-time jobs. And it's like, how do you take what you've done and transfer that to a new job? And so, it was like, oh, I worked at this small little mom and pop retail place and I helped them with their email marketing. And it's like, how'd you grow their email marketing and all those things? And, and I don't want to age myself too much, but I was around before social media, before even the internet existed. And I think one of the jobs that prepared me the best for, and why I love doing this, is when I was a lot younger, I would work at a bowling alley behind the counter, at a bar as a bartender. And when you get to deal with not only happy people, but very upset people, you learn very quickly. And the thing I love about being online that I don't think most people get, and some of you brought this up, is like when you're face to face with somebody, there is no like muting, blocking, just ignoring them. You are like right there with them. And so if you can deal with somebody face to face, you can deal with somebody online, all different types of personalities. And I think that's what it kind of taught me, is just being in these customer faced retail scenarios really kind of taught me how to deal with a whole bunch of different personalities, which really made it easy to get into community management for me.
Yeah, I think for me, for what I would say is, let me get Adrian's little hello off of there. I think everybody who works in community should take a part-time job working in retail during Christmas in either toys or electronics. Because if you can get through that, you can get through anything. Nothing that people throw at you will overcome you. Just survive that and you'll be fine. But yeah, I think a lot of people I've talked to will reference retail experience or customer service experience, because really that's what we do. In a lot of ways, is that we're negotiating with somebody because they're trying to solve a problem typically, or they have questions and they're just looking for answers. People come to communities for a lot of reasons, but it's still that interpersonal skills that needs to be built up, and working with face to face with the public is the best way to do that. When you're forced to engage with people, you have to be nice sometimes when you probably don't want to be. Fast food kitchen was so brutal. Excellent. All right, we'll go on to the second question. What should a first-time community manager expect on their first few days or weeks in their new role? See, I told you, awkward silence. I'm gonna call names. No, I'm just messing.
First. I think first-time community manager. I think it kind of applies to really anyone who's starting a job. I think like the best thing to do, or even when I've like set up my teams, is like to have people do inductions and do them. I'll kind of give them like a list of people that they need to meet, or even if someone is starting, I do feel like they should, if a list of people hasn't been provided, they should ask like, hey, who within the organization is important for me to meet. So I set those up, and I'm like, look, if you set up these meetings, it should be about you, about them, some questions you have, and then you build a nice foundation. So even yes, so I think that's a good way to just like build relationships within the company, understand what people do, what their challenges are. I just find that that's a really good way to build that relationship. there was a couple people that I set up inductions with very beginning. I never actually ended up working with them, but like they've ended up becoming really good contacts later on. And you know, I think that's something that you can do also with like your community members, like trying to figure out like, you know, just because people like you might run events, or you can always like try to meet people individually. Like when I was at Turing, one of the things that I introduced was doing like a weekly focus group with these different segments of developers. So so we could understand like what their expectations were, what they wanted to do. So yeah, inductions I think is probably the best thing to do in the first few weeks.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Even as a seasoned community manager, someone at my most recent job, yeah, you know, the first thing I did was kind of reach out to everybody. There was a gap between when, you know, my last, the previous person in the role left, and when I came on board of 3 months, and some of the processes that she had in place that she did at a regular cadence just completely fell apart because, you know, there was no quick, easy knowledge transfer. And so it took me months and months and months to kind of rebuild all that back up and figure out what she was doing and where she was doing it and who she was doing it with. And you know, even today, I do the same thing. First thing I do to come into a new role is find out everybody that's involved with the community in whatever way, shape, or form they do it. Those who may not know the value of it, and introduce them to the community in a way. One of the things that, you know, this time around is that my predecessor was so good at networking within the company that she didn't really network within the department she was in because, you know, you're interfacing with so many people. She just didn't have the bandwidth. There was too much going on to be able to do that. And so they wanted me to kind of bring that back in and say, hey, you know, community, at least here, is under marketing, and you need to be part of the marketing department, and let's work together for that. Whereas she was very in tight with support. We're a support community, and knowledge base, and, you know, the ideation and all that kind of things. And she did a wonderful job. I'm not knocking her, but you know, that was just one of the asks is to better integrate back into marketing with the community and such. And that's what I've been working on for 2 years now. So it took a while. It takes time.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that. I think just what to expect. Like, you're not going to get it all on the first day or the second day. I think take your time. And especially it's so dependent on, you know, is this a community that has existed for a while? Is this a new thing? Are you coming in to overhaul? Are you coming in? There's so many other things that this question doesn't really cover. But the one thing that I used to tell when we hired on new members to our team, I used to say, hey, you're going to have like so many amazing ideas for how we can make this even better. And please put them on a doc for the next 3 months, and then you can bring them to me because you're just getting caught up, you know, and you might have a really great idea, but which should be shared, but you might over the next month start to see some of the context for maybe why your company does things the way that it does. It doesn't mean that you should stifle that creativity and fresh vision that you're bringing, but I've found that it helps the team if you don't come in like guns blazing, like we need to change all of these things right now, because you just don't have the context for, usually in community evolves so quickly. And a good community is like really evolving according to like what its members need. So there might be a very good reason for the structure that it has. So give yourself the time and the grace to understand that first before bringing all of your fresh ideas, which are so needed in a new role, so needed, but just be mindful of the timing, I think, is what I have felt.
No, I think that's a very good point. Very good point.
And
it's funny.
I was going to say, I am so impressed that people have had people already telling them like what to do when they came in, because I remember one of the jobs I got, I was the community manager, the only one. My hiring manager wasn't even like really directly, you know, related to what I was going to be doing, because we were launching a new product, and it was like I didn't have an existing community. I didn't have like a real job description. I didn't know what I should be doing. But what I started doing, and it's kind of like what we heard, was I started asking and connecting with other people in the organization. But then I didn't wait for somebody to tell me what to do. I actually just started diving in and experimenting and, we were a big media company and we were very left wing, and and I knew that we wanted different voices, so I would search a lot of the liberal people, and I would search for a lot of the conservative people on Twitter, and I'd just be like reaching out and saying, hey, we're getting ready to launch this, would you like to be on air with us, and would you like to check it out? And they're like, some of them thought I was crazy, and some of them were like genuinely interested that we wanted to hear their perspective and their voice. So I think it was just all prepping me for what we've all talked about was, we don't know exactly on the first day or first 2 days or 3 days what is going to be expected of us. But over time, you start getting in a groove, you start understanding what's happening, you start getting to understand your community and what people are potential members and existing members. And then you start developing your plan and your strategy for what you want to do. You don't necessarily need to jump in and think you need to have that strategy ready to go, because I think until you have a good understanding of what you're dealing with, you can't really set a strategy for an unknown.
Yeah, and I was thinking something similar to what Bree mentioned about if this is a community that already exists. So you will be taking over that community, or you will be actually starting from the ground up. But also something, and maybe this is just my introvert side that is compelling me to say that you are going to talk to a lot of people, and this might drain you a little bit, but just give yourself that space. I think it's during these few days, weeks, and maybe even months that there's going to be a lot of time to focus, time to plan, time to hopefully, I think if you, and this might come from management or people that wants this community to run basically, but if possible, just you're going to be asking a lot of questions, and that's also okay. So time to focus and time to plan, I will say. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I can close us out. I totally agree. I feel like it's very easy to think of different tactics and ways that you can build amazing community events. You could do it all in theory, but really, you shouldn't. It's important to be at every step, very clear about what you're doing day to day, how that feeds into metrics that are agreed upon among all of the stakeholders of what a healthy community looks like. And then also, and again, this is very software company talk right now, but how those community health metrics then feed into your departments or even the company's higher level goals. And I think what I've seen to be able to successfully get there, because it takes a while, at least 3 months to get that type of alignment, is you want to be clear of who on the executive team is bought into community, then actually put together a deck of just the existing state and set those 15-minute chats with all the different teams that you might interface with, and recruit people from the grassroots level, but then also make sure you're getting clarity on that top down. Because I've experienced through trial and error, just treading water at different companies and then having to rework the strategy, but getting back to that goal of just identifying that exec champion and then regularly having clear channels where you're just sharing and repeating kind of what the current state is and what the opportunities are has allowed me to ensure that the program is continually funded and building that momentum and getting more investment. So that's kind of been my approach.
Oh, David, I think
you're muted, David.
I am muted. How rude. So our next question, really some of us kind of answered it during the last question. So if anybody just has a quick comment, we can just catch it real quick and move on. What are the best practices for honing in on a community you don't know much about? Some of us talked about reaching out to other people in the company and that kind of thing. So if there's anything we missed that you want to kind of zero in on, this is the question to do it on. Anyone?
Get on the phone with your members. Get in one-on-ones with your members.
You're singing Tim's song.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, great. Oh, Tim, did I steal your thunder?
No. This is what it's about. This is why this is why we do that bobblehead thing. Yep.
Good. Well, that's full stop for me. That's it.
Very good. All right. Nobody else? I think, like I said, a lot of us talked about it, before. That was this question. I'll just pop it there for briefly.
No, and I would add too, like, based on the input from the members, also like advocating for them internally, because that's like a unique thing about the community manager. You're not only in touch with all the people that you work with, but you're actually talking to customers every day or talking to whatever audience it is that you're building a community for. So I think that then factors into your plan. And then once you've put together a plan, it's just about executing on it and checking in at every step.
Yeah. And if it's not working, don't be afraid to leave it alone. Move on to something else. Yeah. All right. How can the role of community evolve over time within a company? Some of us have said they started off as social media and kind of inherited community along the way. That's not to say you can't build a community on social media. I'm not implying that. Just that, the role evolved over time into, an audience, into a community. So how can your roles evolve? What have you seen it evolve as? No?
I guess because again, it is a community of practice internally, and maybe I also like to geek out about different topics, but I see that my role, let's say, it could evolve into employee branding, and I have seen other companies as large as Coca-Cola that they will have an employee branding / community manager / I don't know, events manager. And so I think because of the many different activities that we do, that again, as it has been mentioned, social media, and now a lot of community manager roles out there, they will include that as well, which it's a bit dangerous if lines get really blurry in that sense. But I at least, again, from my perspective, I do see that employee engagement, employee branding, maybe that's also touching on HR or people ops, talent acquisition, etc. So yeah, I think there can be some hints of different practices into community management for sure.
Anyone else?
I think for me, how I saw my role evolve, because I was with this company, Seiko, for 6.5 years. And so I'm a generalist. So I thrive in like the ambiguity of like, I have to hit 6 different skill sets within the same day in order to feel like I thrived. So the like launch of the community was like totally my sweet spot, just like scrappy, figuring it out, little bit of data, little bit of like graphic design, little like all the things was my sweet spot. So I really struggled when the community grew to 1,000 and I was being moved into this director of leadership development role, into a more specialized skill set, but I still had this generalist superpower. And I was like, so it was honestly one of the main, I didn't recognize it at the time, but it was one of the main reasons that I left and went on my own to help craft communities, because that's where my skill set lies. Within our community, we saw like leadership development emerge as a role, training, if there's like a learning component within your community, any sort of curriculum. There was like a marketing team for the community. So like teaching the community how to market for the brand, like how to communicate, how to provide assets, so that was like a whole thing. And then there's like the community moderation. So just to name a few of like those kind of specialties that evolved. For me, that was tough because I didn't thrive as much in that space. And so I needed to find something that was going to better suit my skill set.
Very good.
I was going to say, I remember I was at a job where I was Department of One and helping launch a community to being promoted to the director of community, managing a team of 57 people, which you can imagine are completely different skill sets and daily duties. So it was really just being open to that, understanding the differences, but also the similarities in, I think, what both of them hold. I went from actually interacting with people to running a team of moderators. And, but that didn't mean that at high escalation points, I wouldn't have the one-on-one conversations to engage with certain members of the community. And so, but that's what I found like I really loved. And now I am just like one who loves the strategy of how do we put a community plan together and get one launched. And that's what I love doing today.
Yep. Very good. Very good. All right. I'm going to jump to the next question since, like I said, we kind of covered a lot of that. I'm going to have to call out Haas on this one since it's very real for him. And, I didn't know this when we asked him to come on and join us, but have any of your roles ever dissolved? And I should say, what are you doing next, Hassan?
Well,
I can actually speak to this too. So,
sure.
don't feel like...
Yeah. So, this has happened to me a couple times, where, I've been a contractor before. I've been a contractor at a lot of the tech companies. So I was at Google for a couple of years. I did a contract at Instagram, another one at Grindr. Grindr, I did employer branding. So it was interesting to hear Isabel talk about that. I loved that. Actually, it was really cool. And then, this last role, I got laid off. The previous role, they took marketing off my plate and wanted me to be a salesperson, which I am not. So, it's tough. What do you do? And I was like, I've tried to, when I got laid off, it was me and my whole team. And I really felt responsible. They're all I'm in California, but they're, in India and Pakistan, Nigeria, all over the place. And so I really wanted to make sure that we stayed in touch. And so we have a little WhatsApp group that we have. And even while listening to you all talk, I started thinking what are things that we can do when we're laid off or, unemployed or job seeking to keep positive. Applying for jobs 100% of the time is not great, or it hasn't worked for me because with rejections comes you take a lot of things personally. It just can be really a downer. And so, this time I was really intentional. Look, I want to spend time on House, which is my own community. What can I do to give back to my community? So that having that as a side project has been really valuable. I think also I've been interested in kind of transitioning into government. We'll see if that pans out, just because tech has been super volatile for me. And I'm really tired of having to look for a new job every year. So, I have a house. And so I just want something a bit with more stability. So I've been organizing some informational interviews, and that's been really helpful. I feel if you're doing an informational interview, I wanted to find people who are transitioning from tech or private sector to government. And so I put that out on LinkedIn, and then a few old colleagues kind of connected me to a few people. And that's been really helpful, just because, what it does is it kind of puts you in control, makes you feel like you're driving the conversation as opposed to being a candidate, which can sometimes feel like a weird power dynamic, something that's kind of puts you on the same level as the other person. And I think the other thing is just attending events like this. I think I try to attend at least a couple events a week, especially ones where, I'll have an opportunity to connect with people or talk or just it's more practice. So, all these things are things that I've done to help me stay positive. Additionally, I've just started being really intentional about okay, here are the companies that I want to work for. These are the companies that haven't done, as far as I know, haven't done layoffs. I really want to get smarter about understanding those types of signs that you should recognize when a company is going to do layoffs. I just need to vent for a minute about the layoffs. So many companies are laying people off. And our leaders are, the people who hire us trust us to do our jobs. And I'm well, what's your job if you're not gonna like, why hire people if you're going to lay them off 8 months later? Like, surely, like, that's your expertise to like make sure that doesn't happen. So I don't understand like how so many of these companies have like how this has hit so many of us. I know the economy has been weird, but like they're like, yeah, sorry, we've had to restructure like people off. I mean, this is people's lives. Like not everyone like bounces back that easily. So I'm pretty frustrated with that. And I don't really know what to do with that frustration other than like, you know, work on these other things. But
Yeah, channel it and put it in positive directions. That's all I can tell you.
I was going to say, Hassan, when I was in my role of director, we were going through layoffs and I had to go down to my HR person 3 times and lay people off. And the third time she told me I was getting good at it. And I said, that is not something I want to be good at. And I was gone out of there like 3 months later. And you know how they always force you to do an exit interview? She goes, I don't even need to do an exit interview with you. I know why you're leaving.
Well, because you had to, you know, decide who was going to be laid off, or
Oh yeah. And to be honest, I mean, they came back and legal department told me I couldn't lay people off, and I said, if legal department wants to tell me who I can and can't let go, then have them make this decision on who's going. Otherwise, take my suggestions. And they weren't suggestions. They were like, my boss was the CTO and he told me how to do this very analytically. And I did that. And I just came up, I started at the lowest scoring people and then moved up again. And, you know, there was no personalities. There was no, who's my favorite person? Who do I get along with? It was all just based upon performance. And that's what it came down to. And so when legal was telling me I couldn't, it was like, you know, hey, if you don't like my decision, you come up with your own names.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing I would add that I think is kind of unique to the tech industry, because the way the cycle works with like booms and busts, and I feel like it's almost like a rite of passage, and there's less judgment in this industry if you are, you know, swept up in a reduction in force or like part of a restructuring. A lot of times it doesn't even have to do anything with performance. And it has no reflection on anyone's quality as a professional. And so I found that refreshing in the tech industry. And sometimes when I've talked to people in other industries like finance or government, they're like, how is it that you've had like 3 jobs in the past 5? Like for me too, like I'm kind of like Bree, where I thrive in that like launch and scrappy and, you know, flexing all these different, you know, generalist skills. So yeah, sometimes I've gotten a program to a good place and it's running itself, and then I get a call from another place and I move on. And so it is just like employers kind of, again, do this more or less humanely and kind of can let you go at any time. You can also leave at any time. So I don't know. I think I try to keep positive. It is a little bit hard to wrap my head around the macro conditions, like what's going on with inflation, what's going on. Should, you know, especially if your role isn't tied to revenue when you work in a private, or it's harder sometimes in community management to align and like tell that clear story of like, hey, I'm saving you X amount of dollars. So you can hedge your risk and vet the companies before you join them. And also, yeah, you could also have your own side hustle, launch your own company, which is something that I think is super exciting, especially because this space is really blowing up.
I'll tag in right there because that, I mean, I could go on and on. I have like, this is my soapbox of just the power dynamic of being like a full-time employee. Like even just the term, I'm a full-time employee, implies that you have all of my time. Like, I don't understand. That's not real. And so I, as a consultant and going out on my own, I personally, and Hassan, like what I sense is like, not just a frustration with like the economic downturn, but like there's just an inherent power dynamic when you are like salaried with a company that I always felt like I never had the upper hand. I was always like, when you're in an interview, they're like, tell us why you're a good fit for this role. And here's what we're willing to pay you. And now as a consultant, I can say, this is my sweet spot. These are my deliverables. This is like where I will shine and how I will make your community better. This is my pricing. It's just a totally different power dynamic for me that has helped me have better boundaries around what I can do and what I can't do. And rather than just, I felt so constantly in like a a people pleasing mental state in a full-time role, that like there was so much on the line, and like all of my stability was always on the line. And now none of my eggs are in one basket. They're in at least 3 to 4 baskets at a time. So I don't know, for me, and I know that like there's like a perceived instability with consulting and having multiple clients, but for me, it actually feels more stable to have not all of my eggs in one basket, and I could get let go, frankly, at any time for reasons completely outside of my control. So I didn't really realize all of this when I started looking for clients, but the one really practical tip that I have, I read this book, Designing Your Life. It sounds kind of cheesy, but it's phenomenal. If you're ever in a transition state between roles or career, I highly recommend it. And one of the key parts of this book was they were basically like, if you want to find your dream job, have 100 coffees. And so I quit my job in February of 2020. If we can all just go back real quick and think about where we were February 2020. Yeah. Horrid. So
it was the time before.
Yes, it was that glorious. So I quit, the pandemic hit, and I was like, well, shit, I guess I'm going to do these 100 coffees in the next 90 days because that's all I have savings for. So I got on Zoom, I had like my little Zoom coffees, 30 minutes each. And at the end of each call, I would just ask like, hey, after hearing what I'm talking about and what I'm interested in, is there anyone who would be interesting for me to talk to? And after I did it, I hit my goal. I had 100 coffees in 90 days, and that got me my first client work for the first year and a half.
Oh no, we lost Bray.
I'm so sorry. I have to get going. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
I was going to say, David, this is Bree's back, but this is a perfect segue just to interrupt the show and let everybody know that next week we're talking about launching or growing personal connections in your community. But I think that's also in the community space as well, because that can be so valuable and what everybody's sharing here for this question.
Yeah, that's true. So my story, to Haas's point of sometimes you just can't tell. Twice in my career, I have had my role go away, basically. And within a month or two, the company that I worked at was bought by another company. And so, if you think about it, it was either that my role existed at the other company already and they were making cuts, or they were reducing costs to make it a more attractive buy. So you just can't always know what's going on behind the scenes because they just don't talk about it. Sometimes it's for fiduciary reasons and sometimes it's not to panic the employees, but you just don't know. And so you just kind of have to go with the flow sometimes. But probably the more interesting story of a role disappearing is I was at a company that where the community role was under customer success. And so there was we had a chief customer success officer. So there was this whole silo, and the chief customer success officer left the company and they didn't backfill it. So that whole silo just disappeared overnight. It was just gone. So I spent the next year bouncing from different departments in the company because nobody was quite sure if they wanted to own the community. So I was in support for a little while. I moved over to, the developer side of it for a little while. I landed in marketing for a little while, and they just decided, nah, I guess we don't need you anymore. And they, not only did they let me go, they let the community go completely. They just dissolved it because they just couldn't find how to make it work for them, which is a great lead-in for the next question. How does someone show their boss that they are adding value, and what metrics are good for measuring this, so that you don't have to worry about your whole silo disappearing and bouncing around from place to place, and you can save your job? Anybody want to take a stab at that? There's lots and lots that we could talk about. It just depends on the type of community and what the goal is and that kind of thing. But is there anything specific that you'd like to add as a way of showing?
I was going to say, you definitely want to make sure that you're just not measuring vanity metrics and tying your community metrics into how it's helping business objectives. Because if you're not doing that, it's just all that's how you easily find yourself not in a position, having your community position dissolved and moving on to a next role. Because if you're not doing that, you're really just spinning your wheels, and nobody knows what, in your organization, what you're doing. So that's my 2 cents on that.
But I grew the community by 10,000 people last month.
That's impressive,
Yeah,
David.
I would say it is so important to align with metrics that matter to your function and then to the business. There's also kind of a challenge with community metrics because you can never really take full credit for the outcome. So say your business has a huge increase in traffic due to an unforeseen circumstance, say a global lockdown. You can't take full credit for all of that traffic to your community site, right? But you can also report out that our community grew by X amount and I'm the best, right? So one thing that I'll just plug like 2 resources that have stood out to me recently and kind of helped me navigate this is Richard Millington has a really great, again, like consulting practice, and recently shared this concept of community-driven impact as a new measure to really infuse like what's unique to this role and how it drives value is sometimes difficult to capture in a CSAT or like a cost savings model tied to support deflection or things like that. So I thought that was a really good thing recently that stood out to me and I want to explore more. And then the other is the In Before the Lock podcast by Brian Oblinger and Erica Kuhl. They just have all these templates that help you translate the chaos in your brain into like things that make sense to corporate executives. It's like been so helpful to just make sense of, again, how do you distill all the things that you're doing, especially when you're a full-time employee at one company, into value and communicate that in a format that will resonate with executives who really like, you're just 15 seconds of their like brain capacity in a day, right? You really need to make that super succinct and super clear.
Yeah, I'd add to that. I would start by asking whoever the higher powers be, like, what is important to you about this community? Because this is kind of like just being in the middle management role, there might be things that are important to them about the community that are actually not important to the community. And so if you're looking, if the objective here is like job security, you might have to figure out, you're straddling that line of like this thing that higher ups care about that actually isn't going to add a lot of value to a thriving community. And so you can I think there's 2 ways you can approach it. One, you can like figure out how to work the narrative so that you're meeting both expectations, but it's also like your role as the community manager over time to educate on what are the metrics that actually should matter in this community. But I think you have to understand before you go in assuming that they value that, you really have to ask what is important to your higher ups and whether or not that actually connects with what the community is going to be able to do or what's important to the community is a different matter. But I think asking that question first so that helps with the job security side, but then there's a whole other task of, as a community manager, educating your team on what metrics are going to actually be important to look at and what metrics matter.
Yeah, I think for me, I have to say that the value that I bring or that I want to bring to the community, and this is something that I mentioned, I think, since day one to my manager, is that if I can have our female product managers, because they have a story to tell, and like one of the things management wants to promote is that if people in the team can be speakers and can write content, so they want them everywhere. So for me, as I said, something that I mentioned to my manager since day one is that I know my male product managers, they will be quite keen on doing those things, but I think if I can encourage and showcase somehow the female product managers from the team, that will be, I think my manager will appreciate that. But I think for me, if I can bring that value to them, more importantly, I think that's, for me, that's a major plus. So yeah.
You're muted again, David.
We are just about out of time. I gotta watch that mute button. I don't want you guys to hear me typing. So
This
what
reminded me
we'll
of the
do-
good old Google Plus Hangout,
I
David.
know.
You're muted.
so-
You're muted.
Yeah. Just to wrap things up, if we'll go back around the horn and talk and let you guys say who you are, and if anybody wants to reach out and connect with you, you can tell them where they can find you, that kind of thing. I will say for Haas, who is no longer here, you can get him at I think it's askhaas.com is what it was. Is his website if you want to reach out to him there. Isabel will put you up first, let you say how people can get a hold of you if they want to learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. You can connect with me on LinkedIn or as well on Twitter, and you can see my handle over there.
Very good. And Bree?
Yeah, Brie Lever. You can find me on LinkedIn, or please don't tweet me. I'm so scared of Twitter, but you can find me on LinkedIn, or my website is emberconsulting.co.
Very good. Jeremy?
Amazing. Like and subscribe. Hit
Thank you,
that
sir.
bell.
I hate doing that, so thank you.
Again, I definitely don't have a huge following, but I have amazing connections. It was so good to meet you all today. I am also on LinkedIn and happy to connect there at any time.
Yes, and my amazing co-host who survived the hurricane, as did Jeremy, Tim McDonald.
And we're waiting for it to pass you as a tropical storm or just
That's
a very big
Yep.
low pressure system. But no, I'm Tim McDonald down in Tampa, Florida. Twitter is my favorite, so you can go to @TA McDonald, but you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, all those places. And I will reiterate what Jeremy said is please visit thecommunitymanager.com. Go to our YouTube link at the upper right hand corner and subscribe to our page. We would love to have, and I'm talking to all of our guests, if you haven't already done it, you need to do it too. Make sure that you subscribe so that we can get our custom URL.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Although it's on pause right now, YouTube's doing something and they won't let us change anything. So,
You need like
but anyway,
10,000 to get that?
it's 1,000 subscribers nowadays.
Oh, 1,000.
Yeah, it's a crazy number.
Used to be like 50 or something back in the day.
All right. So I want to thank our guests and my co-host, Tim McDonald, for joining us today. And thank you to our audience, who includes Jeffrey, Elativity, Adrian, and Matthew this week. If you would like to be a guest, please, on an upcoming episode, or have a topic you would like us to cover, please head over to thecommunitymanager.com, click About Us, and hit the Contact Us page. Again, thank you to our guests, and thank you for joining us. And we will see you next week. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.